Hello and welcome to The Truth About Storytelling, the show that pulls back the curtain on how words become worlds. I'm Tyreen Martinson, fantasy and sci-fi author, lifelong poet, and former teacher. Here, we trade shiny book blurbs for honest craft talk, the sparks, the stumbles, and the sacred ordinary moments every writer faces. If you're here to grow your voice on the page or in a poem, you're in the right place. Let's write brave stories together. Today, we're weaving together three threads: the story of the very first poem I loved writing back in high school, a poem I wrote recently about why I love poetry, and a quick look at my Clifton strengths, those 5 talent themes that keep showing up in my creative life, and how I believe each of these topics can help you as a writer. So first up, I want to talk about how I fell in love with poetry. So I want you to picture an extremely awkward 15-year-old me, acid wash jean jacket, spiral notebook, and a deep conviction that poetry just wasn't for me because I was going to be a fantasy and sci-fi novelist, in big serious letters. And then came along Miss Evans, my English teacher. She had us enter into a poetry writing unit, and even though I protested and said I'd rather write a bunch of short stories, she pulled me aside and said, "I think you would like poetry if you just tried it." So in the class, she gave us an example of what's officially called a concrete poem, sometimes called a shape poem, where the words form a picture on the page. And the ones that she gave us had many different shapes and were written by different poets. And every line bent to trace the outline of the shape. And the shape had meaning in the poem had meaning with the shape. And it was really cool and really interesting. So I accepted the challenge. I wrote a poem about a cloud, arranging the words the entire upper piece looked like the cloud, with little slanted lines for rain. And something clicked. I realized poetry wasn't just about rhyme or lofty language. It was about seeing ideas come alive in unexpected ways. So fast forward nearly 40 years, and I still love that playful intersection of words and imagery. In fact, there's a fresh, concrete poem, Blue Balloons, in my upcoming collection, To Speak, a quiet nod to that first spark when I fell in love with poetry. So how can this help you as a writer and as a reader? Well, I think it's always good to challenge ourselves. It's always good to step outside the box that we've put ourselves in and discover new things and new ideas. Sometimes that means picking up a book we've never read before or a type of genre we've never read before. And sometimes it means trying poetry, trying screenwriting, trying something that we've just never done. Because you never know, we might just like it, and we might just fall in love with it and end up being fairly good at it. Now, I'm not trying to brag there. I did get a second place, or tied for a second place in a poetry contest, but I know that I spent many years writing poems that never made it outside my journal. But I do believe that when you pour passion into something, you slowly become better at it over time. Speaking of passion, let me read that poem to you that I shared earlier this week on a couple of my social media sites. It feels to me in a way like a good bridge between playing with form and understanding how ideas move inside us. This poem is called Words Dance. I open my notes to find poems and lists. Somehow the two smashed together in synchronistic rhythm. And I wonder if lists are poems in disguise. Storage cubes, bananas, cucumbers, peppers, red and gold, Earl Grey tea, energy drinks, new jeans, art for empty walls. To speak of the heart under and over the matter, soul patterns found in pottery shards, dug up by dusty hands, specificity, syllables in motion, list or poem, both or neither, doesn't matter. Words dance. So that's a poem I wrote recently and I enjoyed it. It brings together what I love about poetry and how words do dance on the page. And we have this combination of imagery and specific realistic items, but also big ideas that kind of come together on the page. To me, this poem is proof that ideas can waltz into even the ordinary corners of our life. And that dance of ideas connects with what I discovered when I was taking my Clifton Strengths assessment, which is kind of an interesting thing. My very top theme in Clifton Strengths, my top strength is ideation. So let's talk about what that means and how the rest of my top 5 shape the way I write poems, just like the one I shared with you today. Over the last few years, I've heard writer after writer after writer rave about Clifton's strengths and how understanding their strengths help them work smarter and not harder. So curiosity won out. I took the assessment last month mainly to see if it might illuminate my creative process before the Kickstarter rush. If you're new to Clifton Strengths, it's a research-based tool that identifies your top talent themes, natural patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving. The idea is to lean into what you do well instead of obsessing over weaknesses. So my top 5 arrived in this order: ideation, strategic, connectedness, achiever, and intellection. So let's look at how those strengths fuel my poetry and my writing. So ideation is all about generating novel concepts. That's the heartbeat behind every new poem idea, every new story idea I have. Like turning clouds and rain into something with more meaning, it keeps my creative well brimming. Strategic means I instinctively sort possibilities and spot the best route forward. When a poem or a story feels chaotic, strategic helps me decide whether it needs a sonnet's tight walls, a concrete poem silhouette, or the freedom of blank verse for poetry. Strategic also helps me decide if a poem or a story, is meant to be short or a novel in length. Connectedness reminds me that stories, people, and faith are woven together. It's why my poetry often links a garden gate to grace, or a starry sky to whispered prayer. Nothing exists in isolation. Achiever brings the get-it-done grit. Daily drafting, revising, kickstarting, editing. Achiever keeps the pen moving, even when my muse would rather take a nap. Intellection craves depth and reflection. It invites long walks where I mull over a single metaphor until it rings true, perfect for the quiet pondering that some poems require. So seeing these strengths spelled out felt like rediscovering that teacher's invitation. Try poetry. You might like it. Only now the invitation is from within, reminding me why I create the way I do. So what does this have to do with you as a writer or a reader? I recommend, again, that everyone who hears this tries to read a new type of book, whether it's a children's story or a poetry book or a bit of theater. I think it's fun to change up what we read and what we write now and then. I think it really helps boost our creative abilities. It helps fill our creative wells. And so I recommend that to anyone who's listening to this. And also, if you're a writer, or if you hadn't thought you were a writer before and you want to try it, try writing your own concrete poem. Pick an object or symbol that matters to you. A teacup, a mountain, a lighthouse, a lantern. Shape the words around inside its outline. Or you could hop onto Clifton Strengths the Gallup Clifton Strengths site, take the assessment and see which themes or strengths drive your creativity. I do think it's a worthwhile assessment to take. And yes, there's a cost associated with it, but I am learning quite a bit. And I think the things I'm learning are going to help me become a stronger author, poet, and teacher, as well as being hopefully a better podcaster. So if you decide to write a concrete poem or take the Clifton Strengths test, you can always share with me your work and your discovery. You can tag me on Instagram or X at Tyreen Martinson, and I would be happy to celebrate your new project and your voice and your shapes and how those things are taking place in your writing life. So before I go, I just want to give you a quick reminder that the Kickstarter for To Speak, Poems of Inspired Courage, Wild Grace, and Sacred Ordinary launches July 15th. If you want any early bird perks and to see what brand new concrete poem might be in that book, join my email list or follow me on social media for launch day links. Thank you for joining me today. This is a short episode. I will be back next week with another short episode, and I think that's kind of how things are going to go over the next 6 weeks. I'll be doing shorter podcast episodes, potentially more frequently during my Kickstarter campaign. I just want to make sure you all knew that. I will be talking more about my poetry. I'll be sharing poems each week, and I just hope that you enjoy these episodes as much as I enjoy doing them, and I hope you all have a wonderful week. Thank you for listening.